Welcome to English 220 Technical Writing. It's our first week, so let's get started with an introduction to the class. First, we'll have a brief class overview. Read everything. This includes your syllabus, the learning materials, and of course, the discussion board. That brings us to our next bullet point, which is participate on the discussion board. You want to do this on a weekly basis. The discussion board is worth a significant amount of points, so you can't skip it. I suggest working ahead because you never know when you're going to fall behind. And don't forget to ask questions whenever you have them. You can email me or message me through Brightspace at any time. And last but not least, don't plagiarize. Let's dive into things by looking at an example. We're going to take a look at an email and then think about how you would feel if you received it. What about the email specifically makes you feel this way? Let's take a look. Dear Phil, you were overpaid during the fourth quarter. It seems one of your contracts was processed twice in error. You will see a $2,600 deduction on your June 2016 paycheck to account for this mistake. Please let me know if you have any questions. Sandy. Go ahead and pause your video and make some notes on what you don't like about this email. So what went wrong? Let's take a look. The first sentence reads, you were overpaid during the fourth quarter. You might have been thinking, wait, what? Why? The second sentence says, it seems one of your contracts was processed twice in error. Okay, sounds like a you problem. The problem with these first two sentences is that the first one is a statement that most people would find upsetting, and it doesn't offer any type of explanation. While the second sentence does offer an explanation, it's not a very good one and doesn't take any accountability. Moving on. You will see a $2,600 deduction on your June 2016 paycheck to account for this mistake. You might be thinking, that's not fair, I can't afford that. This is a very blunt statement that would cause most people to respond in a negative way. Even worse, it has a spelling mistake. That means that it's very hard to take this email as being credible. Looking at the last sentence, please let me know if you have any questions. Once again, we have a spelling error, and you might be thinking, I'll definitely let you know, but how do I reach you? There's no email, phone number, or any other way to contact the mysterious Sandy, who is telling me that I'm going to lose a huge amount of money on my next paycheck. Now let's take a look at a better version of this email. After reading it, pause your video and think about why it's better than the original. Dear Phil, due to a payroll error, you were overcompensated during the fourth quarter. I apologize for this mistake and have taken steps to ensure it will not happen again. In order to correct our error, we will need to take a deduction of $2,600 from your June 2016 paycheck. If you would like to discuss alternate repayment options, please call me at 219-983-1600. Please respond to confirm you received this email. Regards, Sandra Jones, with her phone number. So why do you think that this email is better than the previous one? I'll tell you. The first sentence here is opening with the reason for the overcompensation. It's also a little bit more specific. In the second sentence, the writer is apologizing for the mistake, therefore taking some accountability. Even though this is still upsetting news, you might feel just a little bit better about it since there's an apology and a reassurance that steps have been taken to ensure it won't happen again. They're also offering alternate repayment options, so if that $2,600 isn't something you can give up in one fell swoop, you can call them at the number clearly stated in the email to talk about some alternate repayment options. When Sandy's asking you to please respond to confirm that you received this email, that's also showing some credibility and that she wants to ensure that you have this information before it happens. And once again, there's a specific phone number where you can reach the author of the email. Now let's get into the details. Writing is all about making choices, and we make choices every day. How much money we're going to spend, where we want to go, what we're going to wear, who we're going to spend time with, and more. Most of the time, our choices have a consequence. It can be positive or negative. It's essentially cause and effect. We make one decision that results in a specific effect, and we can think of writing in the same way. That's why we want to write with intention and purpose. There are all different types of writing as well. We create and encounter different types of writing and reading every single day, from emails and texts to homework and letters, magazines, blogs, newspapers, you name it, you're reading. You're looking at a screen pretty much nonstop, and every time you're looking at a screen, unless of course you're watching a movie, well, maybe you have subtitles on like I do, so you're reading and watching at the same time. But it's really hard to get away from words anymore just because of how attached we are to our screens. And of course, these different types of writing all have different purposes. They can be to inform, persuade, help, provide direction, ask for action, persuade, and perhaps most importantly to most of us, to entertain. I want to talk specifically about the differences between technical writing versus academic writing. And the reason why there's a whole slide dedicated to this is because the writing we're going to do in this course probably varies a lot from the writing that you've done in other college courses. Academic writing that you're probably used to is the writing that you do in school, like essays. It's usually long-winded and fluffy. It has very strict APA or MLA formatting guidelines, and your reader is typically your teacher. Technical writing is the polar opposite. So this is the writing that you do at work, like writing memos or proposals, maybe even grant requests and emails. Technical writing is short and concise. It gets right to the point without a lot of big words or overly flowery descriptions. Everything is formatted so that it's neat, consistent, and widely recognized and accepted. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that means in a few slides. And in technical writing, your reader is usually a real person. And that's not to say that teachers aren't real people, but teachers read your writing with the purpose of grading it. Real people read your writing with the purpose of learning from it or understanding what you're trying to tell them. In order to really understand writing and how it works, we have to talk a little bit about the important concept of rhetoric. And if you've taken any type of composition course, you've probably already learned all about rhetoric. So this will just be a brief review. So the definition of rhetoric is really making language work for you. So that means choosing your words very, very carefully so that you're going to get the intended outcome from your audience. Politicians and lawyers use rhetoric. In fact, that's really what their whole job revolves around. Politicians are constantly making speeches and airing commercials in order to persuade and convince their constituents to vote for them and to go along with the ideas that they're putting forth. The same is true of lawyers when they're trying to convince a judge or jury members to either acquit or convict their clients. Make no mistake that politicians and lawyers choose every single word very, very carefully. So there's two main components of rhetoric, and that's the rhetorical situation and rhetorical strategies. We're going to take a look at both of these really quickly. So the rhetorical situation is the circumstances that surround a piece of writing. And you can understand the rhetorical situation by asking yourself these three questions. What is the purpose of the piece of writing? Who is the audience or the readers? And what is the social context? So that means, what does society or culture have to say about the topic? And that third point can be more relevant at times than at other times. So it really depends on your purpose, what you're trying to accomplish with that piece of writing. By understanding the specific rhetorical situation of any piece of writing that you do, you're going to be able to execute it better, you're going to choose your words better, and deliver your message more efficiently. Rhetorical strategies are the choices that you make to achieve the desired effect. So again, the easiest example is word choice. So we can call something bad or we can call it nasty. They both essentially have similar meanings. Nasty, however, is a much more negative word and has a worse negative connotation than bad. We can say happy or we can say elated. They're both explaining the same thing, but one, being elated, is much more emphasized and indicates a higher degree of happiness. So being very, very specific about your word choices is considered a rhetorical strategy. There's well over 100 different rhetorical strategies, and we're obviously not going to cover them all here, but some of the more important ones are thinking about whether a piece of writing should appeal to a reader's sense of emotion, their sense of logic, their ethics, or authority, which essentially means establishing credibility. Word choice we've already discussed. Comparisons is essentially when you are taking a difficult concept that your audience may not be familiar with and comparing it to something more relatable in order to help them understand. So this can invite a reader into your piece of writing and allow them to more easily connect with you as the writer as well as with the ideas that you're presenting. Organization is another very important rhetorical strategy that we will talk about in this class a lot. And typically in professional and technical writing, it's organized in a direct fashion. I lost my wording there. It's organized in a direct fashion rather than indirect, because direct gets right to the point. So the difference here is that in an indirect piece of writing, you would be leading up to your main point of significance. So if you have 5 paragraphs on a piece of writing, the 5th paragraph would be the one that gives away the big conclusion. In a direct piece of writing, the conclusion is right there within the first couple of sentences in the first paragraph. So the reader doesn't have to guess about the point you're making. So you make the point and then support the point in direct writing. And in indirect writing, you lead up to the point, offering the support prior to giving the main idea. And the last rhetorical strategy that we'll talk about, just as an example of the many that exist, is the amount of detail that you include. This is really connected to who your audience is and how much they already know about the topic that you're writing about. So as an example, if I were going to be talking about rhetorical strategies with my 11-year-old, I would use different levels of detail that I'm using as I'm giving this particular lecture to you guys, because you guys have a stronger background in writing and really just life experience. So I can speak in a different way to you than I would to a 6th grader. So all of these things tie in together, this rhetorical situation and rhetorical strategies, so that you can build a piece of writing to make it have the effect that you want it to have. This is just one more little visual to help you better understand how your writing is connected to the rhetorical situation and rhetorical strategies. So at the center of the bullseye, you can see the text, and that's your piece of writing. The very next thing that surrounds it is the rhetorical situation, thinking about purpose, audience, your motivation, the genre and the medium, and the social or situational context. Once you have that all figured out, that's when you can choose the tools from your toolbox, which is the outer circle of rhetorical strategies. So again, these are tools that you have at your disposal as a writer to have the greatest impact with your piece of writing. So let's review the 5 main components of technical writing specifically. Number 1 is clarity. That is always your first goal. You're going to say what you need to say using I guess I like to call it using the dime word instead of the dollar word. So say uses instead of utilizes. Using fancier, longer, more complex words and sentences is not going to earn you more points in this class, and it's not going to earn you a promotion at work. You want to say what you have to say in the simplest way possible. That doesn't mean that you can't have personality in your writing and that you can't be descriptive. It just means that you're writing with intention so that your reader is able to easily understand what you say. No one should have to work really hard to figure out what one of your sentences means. Clarity goes right along with conciseness. Again, this is just using very smart word choices, very smart phrasing to keep everything nice and tight and neat. Accessible document design is something that we actually have a major assignment on in the course, and this is addressing things like headers and headings, using short paragraphs instead of long ones, incorporating bullet lists and numbered lists into your writing, and all things that really speak to the visual look of a document. You don't necessarily think about how something looks on the page as being important, but it really is. The reason why is because large chunks of texts are very intimidating to readers, and they might decide just to skim or skip reading altogether. Point number 4 is audience and reader recognition. You absolutely have to know who you're writing to. Sometimes we write up the ladder to a superior, sometimes we write laterally to a peer or a colleague, and sometimes we write down the ladder if we're a supervisor and we're writing to employees. So knowing which way you're writing and the different types of feelings that your audience and readers might have based off of what your purpose is very important as you're putting together a piece of writing. And lastly, number 5 is accuracy. It's obviously really important to convey your ideas really accurately and not to leave your reader with a lot of questions about what you're saying. So just to kind of sum all of that up, if a reader is responding to a memo, a letter, an email, or something with the question, huh, what? Then what has the writer accomplished? The answer is not much. So if the correspondence is not clearly understood, then the reader will either call the writer for further clarification or simply ignore the information. Neither one of those is what you want to happen. So in either case, the writer's time is being wasted, the reader's time is being wasted, and the message is likely lost. So let's dive a little bit more deeply into clarity and concision. Here's a poor example of technical writing. In order to successfully accomplish their job functions, the team has been needing more workspace for some time now. So we have a lot of words, unnecessary words in fact, and we're going to take a look at a better iteration of this sentence. The team needs more space to do their job. Very clear, very simple. If we break it down, the first sentence has 20 words and 28 syllables. The second sentence has 10 words and 10 syllables. So the name of the game in this class is to say things as concisely and simply as you possibly can, while still being accurate and giving the amount of information that's needed for your reader to understand the message that you're trying to convey. Here's an example of document design and formatting. And I know that the image over here is a little bit blurry, but that doesn't matter. We're not concerned with the words themselves. This is an example of what I meant when I said the visual look of a document is important. So you can see here that up at the top we have the header. So the date to from subject, that group of 4 items is called the header of a document. And it's very important in a lot of workplace communications that these items are included. It's kind of, I guess it's a writing convention. It's very expected. It's very normalized for internal business writing and technical writing to have a header at the top. So we're going to be using a header for most of our assignments. And then you can see the rest of the document is broken up by bolded headings. So headings are the words that you see like topic, audience, and purpose. And at the bottom, strategy. So using bolded headings like this is really, really helpful because it breaks up all the chunks of paragraphs very, very clearly. It also allows for readers to be able to skim the document to look for the information they want. So maybe I'm most interested in learning about strategy. I can very quickly figure out exactly where I should read and skip all the stuff I might not be interested in right now. And that is the key to effective writing, is to let your reader get what they need out of the document in the best way possible. Another feature that you're going to notice of this visual document here is that the paragraphs are pretty short. Your paragraphs in this class should never ever exceed 8 lines, and that's not 8 sentences. It's 8 actual lines on the page. And that's because those bigger paragraphs, as I already mentioned, they intimidate readers. They are not appealing. You guys know how it feels when you open up a textbook and it's just a wall of text. You don't want to read it. You groan internally. And that is not what you want to do when you are writing. So instead, you're going to use shorter paragraphs. Even something as short as 2 lines is 100% fine. The idea is not to have walls of text at any place within a document. And this one is something that maybe is new to you guys. You want to have varied paragraph lengths. So some people think that it's best to have every paragraph be exactly the same length. The opposite is true. People like to see varied length. It changes up the white space that's available to the eye, and it makes the document more visually inviting. And the very last feature that you're going to see here is the bullet point at the very, very end. So in any piece of writing, if you feel that you've got some specific points that are kind of related to the main point, you can break them up into bullet points. So instead of having a bunch of short little paragraphs, it works really well to have this slightly indented bullet point that just, again, further breaks up the white space on the document and also can call the reader's eye to the information they're most interested in. Some rules for the course and generally speaking in the workplace and in technical writing. You're not going to include a greeting like dear Mr. Jones. That's just very atypical in this type of writing. And you're also not going to have a sign off like sincerely Tiffany. That's for letters, and we're not writing letters. Please use single-spaced paragraphs. I know you're probably used to having to do double spacing, but that's not at all realistic in the real world. Nobody double spaces anything ever for any reason. So we're going to do everything single spaced in this class. But you do want to have that extra space in between the paragraphs, as you can see in the image on the right. And you want everything to be left aligned. No indenting paragraphs. Again, that's just not very common at all in the real world. Some people do it, and it's not necessarily wrong, but I'm asking you not to in this class, just to get used to the idea of kind of conforming to what the norm is out there outside of academia. We already talked about this. The paragraph lengths are really important. 1 to 8 lines. 8 lines max. 1 line is okay. I know I said 2, but 1 is fine too. And you want varied paragraph lengths. and use bullet points instead of lists. So that's another reason that you could use bullet points, is if you've got a list of 3 or 4 things that you want to convey, instead of listing them in the sentence as a series using commas, break it up into bullet points instead. The bullet point in the example over here is actually kind of its own little paragraph, but you can have a bullet point with just 3 or 4 words. You can have a series of 5 bullet points that has 3 or 4 words, and that's perfectly okay. You can also use a numbered list instead of bullet points, and that works really well if you're giving instructions. So if something really truly does need to be ordered in a particular way, using numbers can call attention to the fact that the reader should follow things in the order that they're presented. We're also going to include some images in our work this semester, because that's another thing that's very common in the real world, is to include either graphs or tables, as well as sometimes memes and just funny images. And I really want you guys to leave the course knowing how to place an image or a graph, a visual essentially, inside of a piece of writing in an attractive way. And last but not least, and we already did talk about this too, is the headings. And again, these are the bolded items that you're seeing on top of the paragraphs. In one case, it's actually at the beginning of a paragraph, so there's not that extra space. And that's okay too. It's a little bit different way of organizing things, and I don't personally think as effective as having the heading on top of the paragraph, but there are multiple ways to do it. As long as you're bolding, as long as it stands out, then it's really up to you. So that's one of the cool things about technical writing, is that while there are rules, there are not that many of them. You can make a lot of decisions about how you want your writing to look and sound, and still earn a great grade, and still in the real world, convey your message in an impressive way. I know I said last but not least, but also the header, and we already talked about that. So moving on to the week 1 overview. This is what to do next. So everything we just talked about are the foundational concepts for the course, how you should start thinking about the writing and the work that you're going to do in the course. And as I mentioned, if you have any questions, if you're concerned, then all you have to do is send me an email, reach out on Brightspace, and I'm happy to clarify anything that I covered in this video. And I would actually really love to hear from you guys, even if it's just an introduction, just to reach out, let me know that you've checked into the class. So here's your 4 steps on what to do next. Number 1, review all the announcements. That's really important. There's a couple of them already posted, and I post frequent announcements. I try not to spam everybody, but I definitely want to keep you updated. And if I think of something that's important, I'm going to go ahead and send an announcement. I like to remind you about due dates the day ahead of time, just to make sure that you get everything in on time. And number 2 is introduce yourself on the discussion board. So that's pretty easy. Just head on over there, write up a little paragraph to let us know who you are, what you're all about, and then you can move into the rest of the course content. Number 3 is read the week 1 learning materials and post to the other discussion board threads that are concerning the learning materials. Number 4 is get ready for week 2. So this week is going to go by pretty fast. There's not a major deliverable. I wanted to give you guys time to navigate the course, click around everywhere, get a good feel for how things work, review the pacing of the course so you can, kind of click through all the different weeks and see what the major assignments are, and get familiar with the discussion board. So once we do start week 2, we're going to have a deliverable or a major assignment due at the end of the week on week 2. So definitely make sure that you're comfortable with the class and ready to jump in feet first beginning next week. That's all for tonight. I hope everybody has a really great first week of classes, and we'll talk soon. Bye.